All right, let's, at this point, we're going to go to curriculum proposals. Kristen, are you the speaker, or who's the speaker?
Kristen's going to come up, but first, we could probably start with John Beasley.
All right, John.
John, you can pull another chair up, or Kristen slide another chair up. I've been working on this issue. I've communicated this issue to Dr. Keene, Ms. Aruska. We have two curriculum proposals. I moved curriculum proposals into the spring on the operational calendar so that the administration has more time to vet it through. We have time to run it through the advisory council and through the Board of Education. And then we're not rushing to making decisions before October when kids need to pick classes. And past practice in this district has been where they do curriculum proposals in September, October, and that's really short notice with planning and thinking about all the impact before you have to have kids start printing. You start printing the curriculum guides in October, and kids pick classes in November. One thing that was identified is the state does have a 9-week requirement for consumer education. We have that as part of our graduation requirements, but under those requirements, you either took consumer economics, or you took regular economics, and that counted for your consumer ec state requirement and graduation requirement. The other option was you could take an AP economics course. And in review of the curriculum, we did identify that we were not able, in one 9-week course, or one semester course, able to cover all 9 weeks of the consumer economics requirements. So Mr. Beasley, our department chair for social science, and Ms. Matana have been working on a proposal. They brought it to Pam and myself a few weeks ago. Dr. Keene and Ms. Aruska have seen it, and I wanted to bring them forward tonight as well. This is one of those changes that we would need to look at, and we should try to get into compliance and effective for next school year right away. And we have procedures in place, should the board accept our proposal tonight, so that we can tweak the classes we need to for seniors and the curriculum we need to get that in place. John, Kristen?
Okay. Well, first of all, if you, the item in front of you, the packet before you, outlines how the AP curriculum would integrate the state mandated material, looking at the Illinois statutes. If you look at the packet, you'll find that on the left column, you have an itemization of the exact, in many ways, the exact verbiage that's in the statute, or in some cases, an extension of that verbiage. So for instance, the goals of the free enterprise system you would find in Unit 1. And then what we've done here is that in the middle column and in the right column, I have illustrated exactly where in either the micro or the macro course we can fully integrate the concept. And then in the right column, an explanation of how it has been or will be fully integrated. One thing I would say is if you look at the 2 semesters as a whole, you can get approximately 6 weeks in, a little bit more than 6 weeks of the 9 weeks in the first semester, and then approximately 4 weeks in the second semester, which more than meets the 9-week mandate. But because you need to do both through micro and macro, this will mean that students will either need to take micro and macro in order to fill the requirement, or if they choose to just take micro or macro, they'll need to go back then and make a choice between consumer economics or economics to make sure that students receive all of that curriculum. Ultimately, our goal with all of this is to continue to challenge students the way we have at a high analytical level in the advanced placement micro and macro courses, but also provide students with the day-to-day practical knowledge and skills that they really need to have in order to be smart consumers. And we feel that we can definitely do this through the items here. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I do. When Both of my children took macro and microeconomics, and I understand that very well. But in the syllabus of basic economics, to fulfill the state mandate, it sounds as though it's skewed toward personal finances and economics, mainly household economics. Is there a portion of it that gets into where money comes from and how wealth is generated, much like micro and macro teaches?
Are you speaking
Keynesian
of,
and
I'm sorry, are you
versus-
speaking of the regular economics course or
Yes.
the consumer course? You're speaking of
Well, the consumer course satisfies the state
Right.
requirement. But I was looking at the state requirement, and it seems nebulous. It doesn't seem to really describe macro and micro so much as it does understanding how to manage finances.
It does not. There is a moment where it does talk about the use of interest rates, for instance, and there is a moment where it talks about lending practices, which
That's a good thing to know.
obviously are pretty easy to talk about after the 2008
2008.
debacle. But what I would say is that in the regular economics course, in the first unit, we deal with a lot of the introductory concepts. And then in Unit 2, a lot of the pricing and the determinants of pricing that are discussed. There is a specific consumer unit in the economics course. It's about 3 weeks where we deal with, as you suggest, a lot of the day-to-day consumer things.
Terrific.
But the other thing we do in the econ course is we have a full macro unit. So we've always viewed the regular economics course as sort of a taste of all of those things in a 17 or 18-week curriculum. And to your comment about where wealth is generated, the macro unit, which I believe is Unit 4 of the regular economics course, looks at, very honestly, basic monetary and fiscal policy, not the kind of detailed graphical. I always tell people it's an explanation of, what are the main monetary levers, what are the main Keynesian levers, whereas AP Micro and AP Macro
Versus classical.
go into the graphical analysis in those areas, which I'm sure you're familiar with. So.
Okay.
Let me understand then, what we're saying is, if somebody right now this year, let's say they're a sophomore, takes AP Micro and Macro, they haven't met the state requirements for the economics. Is that true?
As of this moment, I think we probably need to, at this point, discuss, because Beth Augustine has been really dealing with this issue with the student services angle of this. So maybe I should turn it over to you guys, how
I
we're
think his
handling
question was, until you implement this curriculum, if a current sophomore student walking the halls
Or
is
junior or senior?
is enrolled in AP Micro and Macro, technically, they should still take the consumer next year or regular economics.
this. We are still in that position, yes.
Well, are we gonna let our seniors graduate that took AP and Micro if we think they didn't meet it this year?
Well, I mean, that's
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
So
It's not their fault.
that's not their fault that we,
it's also not the fault of the juniors and sophomores who already took the class based on this, so.
right.
My concern with this,
Is that anybody moving forward that's first enrolled for AP Micro, Macro, Econ, or Consumer, we correct it going forward
yes.
and not punish the kids that
Yes.
followed our lead.
Yeah, that can be disastrous.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm looking to implement.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
And my question to you, Kevin, is, given that we need to rectify any things that happen with kids that,
No, because I think a majority of the stuff, as Dr. Keene originally saw, is that a majority of the stuff is covered in just maybe not in the direct format but now that we're going to make those changes to curriculum, it will be. And in the way our previous curriculum guide was set up, if you took only one of the AP courses, you got out of the consumer ec requirements. So we're making the proper tweaks to go forward from this point. So.
and this gives our students more options then, right?
It gives our students more options, and it provides them, they don't lose that tremendous challenge that we've had so much success with in the sophomore year of the AP Micro Macro curriculum, but also has an added advantage of creating a natural bridge for students who are moving from micro to macro in terms of review. One of the challenges that all the schools that teach both AP micro and macro face, as I'm sure some of your kids have expressed to you, is coming back to those review sessions for micro in April when the class is over in December. Now you have a more natural bridge between the two classes.
And would you expect most students that didn't, otherwise it would be the same, will they take two separate AP course, tests still at the end?
They still will take two separate tests.
Okay.
And we still will finish the micro curriculum in mid-December.
Okay.
But now we actually save time with some of the reviewing that we don't have to do as much of at the beginning of the macro. So.
Any other questions for?
And how, going forward with the freshman class that's coming in the fall, what have we told them?
That is something now that we are communicating with them. That's Beth Augustine, I know, has been communicating with sophomores and looking at individual schedules of students and saying, look, we've got to transmit this information immediately. So
Freshmen shouldn't really
shouldn't
be impacted because they don't take either the AP micro or macro till sophomore year.
No, but this year's you were asking this year's the current freshman, right?
Yeah, well, they have a 4-year plan.
Yeah.
When you come in the door, you kind of
Absolutely.
lay out the 4-year plan. So what are we doing for them?
Well, those students that will be sophomores next year, their schedule is not set. So when they go through the course verification process, that's something that the guidance counselors can have a conversation with them about and see if they need to modify their 4-year plan. But a majority of the students, for example, the senior class, about 83%.
It was 80, well, this year's sophomore class, 83%. All but 14 of the students went straight from micro to macro. Now, I have not done a formal survey of those 14 students that didn't go into macro directly, but I have talked to several of them, and a number of them have said, well, I could have taken macro, but I opted to take this class instead of it, and I could have done, if I had to, I could have done it. So, 83% is a pretty high number there.
So there should be very few students that are affected with their 4-year plan by this.
We did put, the principal also knows that in the event that there's a conflict due to something that's set up with a 4-year plan, that we can waive another graduation requirement in the event we have to.
Any other questions?
I just want to make a comment. I thought it was very thoughtful, and I'm glad you brought it forward, and I hope we see more of those kind of ideas come forward, percolate to the top.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So with John's recommendation, I'm sorry, with Mr. Beasley's recommendation tonight, being a special committee of the whole, I do ask that if the board is comfortable, we approve moving forward to implement this curriculum change so that the guidance staff and the social studies department have adequate time to prepare students for summer and the upcoming school year. On my action sheet, it says no action required. That's in regards to the English proposal. I want to use that as a discussion point for tonight, and then we can vet it over the next 2 weeks and discuss it some more in May and take action. We have a little more time on that because that's, I will, as we get into that, but I would ask that if we can take a minute to think if there's any other questions, because if possible, I'd like to approve.
Well, can I, just to make sure I understand now, in the old system, if you just took one of them, you didn't have to take consumer economics, right?
That is correct.
So chances are, I don't even know if freshmen can take consumer economics to fit it in, but if they were going to take it, they probably didn't intend to take AP micro, because why would you anyway? So it really probably doesn't have an impact on the freshmen, but assuming some are signed up for it, will we try to get a hold of them and make sure they understand this?
Right.
Exactly.
So
That's why I
then-
want to leave enough lead time.
The second thing is, scheduling-wise, you have several sections of AP micro and macro. Are
We
you
do.
going to be able to, did they happen to align so that you can have the kids that signed up that are sophomores, incoming sophomores, juniors, and seniors move into the whole year course very easily next year?
We're first setting the master schedule now.
Okay.
And you can even have them broken apart,
Sure.
as long as you know they're all going to take both halves.
Okay, so
You're
that doesn't
fine.
So
really
It
you
doesn't
you could take
matter.
AP micro as a sophomore and macro as a junior,
Oh.
as long as you completed those two. in
But
your-
that you want to change it, so
We,
it's
we,
a
we, well,
full-on year.
we want, once again, to give students the option, so, you know, the flexibility, if they, we are accountable for certain concepts in micro.
Okay.
And certain of the concepts in macro, and
Okay.
I've itemized those. It's about 60% micro, about 40% macro. By making sure that we've itemized and identified those within each semester, a student could now take, for instance, macro as a sophomore, and then do the micro AP Gov combination as a senior. It gives them a little bit more flexibility. That's not going to be, from what I've seen and from the pattern, the norm, the 80% of the norm would be micro to macro. But we don't want to force students to have to do both in order if it would take away an option for them. Does that make
But-
sense?
But the counselor, say, okay, go ahead.
Just like, part of your explanation, which made sense to me, is if you go right from micro to macro, you save the learning
We
curve
do.
of taking a group. Wouldn't it be disruptive in, probably in a future year, if 80% of the kids are continuing on and 20% of the kids are a year away, and you have to try to, work on the learning curve
It's-
versus having, I mean, are you gonna?
It's absolutely a
In essence,
challenge.
are you going to have some, let's say there's 3 AP micro and macro sections right now, are you going to try to do 2, where if they're continuing, they're in it, and the other one if they don't, or, I mean, it seems like it'd be disruptive.
It
to the
is, but
continuing
this is a
students.
challenge we've had. You're exactly right, but it's no more marginally. If we were talking about marginal benefit, marginal cost, there's no marginal cost to it. We already have that challenge.
Okay.
So, for instance, for the 14 students who did not, well, actually, the better example is for the few students who took macro, who had not taken micro. Every year, we spend the first 2 weeks me doing, side peer
Okay.
review, one-on-one, things that we've had to do.
Okay.
But that's not a marginal cost. That already existed. That was
Okay.
already a challenge. In order to provide students with these options,
Okay.
we've done that.
Does anybody else have any questions or concerns if we vote, voting this tonight?
No.
We have a motion on this?
I did not include one at this time, but that's why I'm asking. I think the more time we can give them to implement the change would be appreciative.
So why don't we go with,
Just find a different motion.
yeah, let's find a different one.
Why don't we,
You have a proposal on page 60? Or,
well, we could draft one up and do it before visitors' comments.
We'll do that then,
Well, I
okay?
could write one up.
Do you want to write one up and try to do it before visitors' comments on the second end?
Yeah.
All right.
I could do
I'd
that.
like to just add a comment. I think it'd be worthwhile, Pam, to, let's go through to see if there's any more holes in our state requirements. Just I'd like an official review just to make sure there isn't anything else we need to fix.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
John, I don't know if the list is long enough. It is education. Education is dynamic.
How about
Well, this
one?
is just-
How about if I give the?
This is
motion?
state requirement.
You want to do it?
Yeah, here, resolve that the Board of Education, Township High School District 208, Crow County, Illinois, hereby approves
Economics proposal
the economics proposal
presented
presented at the
April 23rd.
the April 23rd Board of Education special meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? Ariane?
Do we have to say what we're really doing? In the motion?
No, we just said as presented in the board pack. Marianne?
Mr. Gritchen?
Yes.
Ms. Ruska?
Yes.
Dr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Cindy?
Yes. All right, then, also you have talking about the English department then, and you're gonna take that.
Sarah Johnson.
I'm sorry, no, I'm sorry.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John, appreciate
Nice
it.
evening.
Thank you.
This is Sarah Johnson, our English department chair. And Sarah's coming tonight. One of the other proposals that was brought to the superintendent and vetted through Pam's department chair leadership council was the the topic of our senior year of English. You have to take 4 years of English to graduate at RB, and the past practice in the curriculum for the 4th year of senior English was various semester courses. And one of the concerns is Sarah is our new department chair in the curriculum review with her department, is that the rigor and content covered in those semester courses, their alignment with the Common Core standards, which will need to be implemented by 2014, which a majority of the states are moving to and going to be testing. And so what Sarah's going to talk to you about tonight is the rigor of our senior English courses, and her proposal to Kristen and Pam and to myself of changing how we set up those senior English courses so that there's more writing and literature and some of that stuff. So,
thank you. I want to thank all of you for listening, and I want to particularly thank, on behalf of my department, Tom Fuller and Wendy Cassens, the primary architects of this proposal, both of whom have been here a really long time, so you may know them. Overall, what we're hoping to do, as Dr. Skinka stated, only with our grade 12 students, is move semester classes that you see at the top, well, kind of in the middle under AP Land Comp, to year-long classes. And then at the bottom, other semester classes moving to non-English credit earning classes. The main reasons, as outlined at the top of the document, are that the Common Core state standards coming our way, as Dr. Skenka says, stress reading and writing, building knowledge through informational texts and rigor, which we do not think is currently there. And secondly, and more concerningly, that our Prairie State results indicate that we have more work to do in our 12th grade year. So this does come to you with the full strength of the English department behind it, and happy to answer any questions or concerns you might have.
some of the general questions that I asked Sarah, just so before the board can think of them, are some of the things that I wanted to be concerned of. Number one was, we do have, this was recently just caught, I think Pam brought that up, or Beth Augustine, we do have some students that graduate early, that graduate after first semester of their senior year. So how would this impact them if they're all year-long courses? So why don't you answer that?
I spoke with Beth Augustine about that topic. She assured me that many students take first semesters of, say, college algebra and walk away with just that first semester. We can offer students 2 first semester classes of 2 different things. For instance, the student could take honors world literature and contemporary literature, and we would of course assure that they wouldn't be reading the same texts in those 2 classes.
They would achieve half a credit each, which would count for their 4th year of credit for English requirements.
And I would just like to add, when I came on as principal here, I did hear from several students who graduated from RB and from their parents that they were going into college unprepared for some of the writing challenges. Some students didn't even write a research paper in their 4 years. So when Sarah took over as department chair, I was concerned that there were some pathways students could get through our curriculum and avoid some of the rigorous tasks that really they should come out of our school having mastered. And so there should be some non-negotiables, that it doesn't matter which combination you take, you're going to get some of these rigorous tasks. And so that was one of the charges I gave her as a new department chair, was to take a look at the scope and sequence of that curriculum, and with Kristen coming on board, to take a look at that as well, so that we could up this. And that was before the Common Core state standards even came to us. But once they started looking, really digging into those, deeply into those Common Core state standards and what they were requiring of the students, the complexity of the text that all students are going to be required to wrestle with and master, we really, it became more urgent that we move this forward as quickly as possible for our students.
Can you help put some color, somebody, on this? You obviously can address writing by requiring a paper like we did when I went to high school. I had to write a paper in history and other courses. So there's other ways to address this than changing the English curriculum here. and I'm going to ask you kind of three things. You can address it however you want. The second thing is it seems to me that creative writing would help you learn how to write. So I'm wondering why we're saying that's not an English course anymore. And then this last question is, in three of the four courses that you're going from a semester to a year, you're going from honors Latin American, honors world literature. You're going from contemporary. Well, I mean, some of them, I don't know what the A, B, and C, D words, but they must have been different, I presume, before, in world A and B. So, but like Shakespeare is the same. So could you explain to us, what's the Common Core specifically you're changing to address that? Because we keep hearing about it,
Right.
but we're not really, at least I don't feel like we're being told specifically what we're addressing.
Sure.
And how does it take creative writing out and make Shakespeare, how do you change Shakespeare to a year and solve some problem by doing that?
So the first question.
And I just want you to know I've got nothing against Shakespeare too, so.
That's okay.
The first question, why can't we address writing in other places? We started the year with that question, and our juniors do write full research papers in their U.S. history classes. So junior year is covered in that. We are seeking to, and we do full-scale long-term projects with the library in our freshman and sophomore years. So this is an attempt to try to streamline that process in the senior year, which we found to be a bit untidy. So we're looking to bring in research projects, writing, debates, the scope of projects in the research world into these classes. It's harder to make certain that it happens when some of these classes a student could have taken as a sophomore and be exempted then from any English in their senior year. We don't like that in the English department. Your second question was about creative writing. That is addressed in the Common Core, to write, kind of to finish a story. I think that's one of the things that they're thinking of putting on the test is this narrative is started, can you finish it? That's one of the three anchor standards. This is, I know education will speak, but there's three areas.
We're supposed to understand that though, if we're sitting here, right?
There's three areas that they are focusing on in the writing standards of the Common Core. Creative writing is one of them, but they're not talking about poetry, they're not talking about plays, they're really talking about narrative text, so stories. And then heavy emphasis on both argumentative writing and on informational writing, so writing to argue and writing to inform or explain. Again, the scope and sequence would be that if we had a student for a year, that we would have a bit more control, perhaps is the word, for when those projects get addressed. Can they navigate out of those or not? The third one is, I can't remember your third
Well,
question.
explain to us what you would do different in going from a semester-long Shakespeare seminar to a year-long to address this
Right.
Common Core issue and writing issue that you're trying to address.
Yes. Well, the classes, the Shakespeare specifically focuses on a multimedia project that involves speech and writing. And Mr. Fuller has been teaching this class for a couple years. He's having a hard time getting through all those speeches with more than 30 in the room. So there's also some kind of weight of the projects that are begging for more than 18 weeks. And as for the contemporary lits, those are genre studies, so there's science and fantasy and gothic and murder mysteries and those kind of things to try to give our seniors an exposure to different genre, popular type of fiction. The contemporary lit would be then a year-long survey of that, much like an American lit is a year-long survey of writers from America. Same with world lit. You can span more time and more parts of the world in that way.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
No, I'd like to comment again, when I saw your proposal, I think it's an excellent proposal writing is a difficult skill. You acquire it over time after writing much. It's rare that anyone writes well with little practice. And if anyone can articulate their ideas, particularly on paper, that will serve them well entering college, it will serve them well in their job. So I really think this is a wonderful addition moving forward in our curriculum. Like this too, like the other proposal, I think is where we need to go.
Sarah, one other question that the board would all need to hear is that, okay, so you have a junior that has a 4-year plan.
Right.
Now, we're not looking at implementing this for the next year's seniors, but what we are looking to implement this is in October, when the next year's juniors in October are picking their classes for their senior year, they would have to pick their year-long English. Now, obviously, we'd have to make some exceptions if they've taken some of these other courses. But have you started to devise a plan with Kristen and Pam and Beth on how you will handle that?
We did survey over 300 sophomores, current sophomores, so the 2015 students. And only 5% of those students had much of an idea of what they wanted to take beyond the year they were in. And of the 5% who knew beyond a shadow of a doubt what they were going to take in their junior and senior years, they were decidedly AP students. So those AP guys, they're all the way through with us. But very few of our current sophomores knew that they wanted to take debate. And I would add they still can. They're just not credit earning.
But with their elective credit earning, but
Right.
not English credit
Right.
earning. So if this were to get approved in May, you and Kristen will be working on a communication strategy then to get this in the hand of parents and get this on the web and out. Maybe the English teachers can pass this out in classes so that kids are aware that when they're picking their senior classes is in next November of 2013, they can adjust accordingly.
Yes.
Are we also, with the ones that we would move to non-departmental credit, try to beef those up too, to be able to be more supportive of Common Core and looking at ways to, argumentative,
They are, I think, within that narrow area. For instance, debate is highly argumentative, but is it spanning into these other areas of high complexity of text? Is it, are we going into other types of writing besides argumentative? What we're hoping to ensure is that in a year-long course, they get exposure to all that, and then these non-English earning classes would be, kind of the side dishes, right? Anybody who wants to be a journalist should take journalism, and same with creative writing. So those would be extras. What we see now in those classes are students who take them to get the credit and are not necessarily have a burning desire to be a poet, but they take creative writing to possibly avoid a tougher class.
And I would just like to add the advantage of a year-long class as a former English teacher when you're working on writing is that you can continue to grow and develop that student. When you start a second semester with a brand new group of students, it takes you a while to learn what their strengths and weaknesses are, to give them feedback. You lose a lot of time, and I think there's strength in just in the complexity of tasks that we're going to be asking them to do to keep them with the same teacher that can develop them and grow them over the course of that year. I think that's another advantage.
Can you clarify one other thing, Kevin? So the recommendation is there's just 4 years. They don't actually have to take the 4th year as a senior, do they?
Not right
Or are
now.
you
Not right
going to
now.
change it and say they have to take English all 4 years?
So they don't have
So
a
that's
gap
two
before
changes.
they
It's
move
not
into.
just
Right.
changing to specific requirements. I assume some kids took 2 English classes like junior year, so they didn't have to take it senior year or something.
And sophomore year.
Okay, so that we're doing both.
Right.
Yes.
We're going to say you have to take English all 4 years.
That's why this, similar to most of the things I bring to you, we've discussed it tonight. We let it sit for a little bit, make sure if there's anybody that heard it in the community or kids that had questions could ask, and we'll bring it to a vote in May.
I have a question and a comment. So if we approve this proposal, and a student wants to graduate in 3.5 years, they can still be accommodated, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then the comment to the board, I think this also does a service for our families, because when all our kids go to any college, even Triton, they have to take a writing test. And then if they don't do well on that writing test, they have to take classes, college classes that cost money but don't count towards their degree.
That's correct.
Many, many parents, even at least one of my own children, have had to take these classes. So cost of college is increasing. We do a service if we prepare our students when they graduate here so that they can skip those classes, and every class they take and pay for counts towards their degree. So I think this is also a service to our families.
Any other questions?
It's more of an editorial, Kevin, but actually, when we do this, aren't we going to have 3 different, you have to look and see whether this is really true, that it's only 14, 15, 16, and 17 another way, because you're talking about changing something different in 15 now, and it'll affect the 17 class different. And the other one is you have to make it clear that, again, the way I would read this, it doesn't indicate that you have to take English all 4 units. It still just shows you have to take 4 units. So
Right.
we'd have to make sure we clarify that
The
4
verbiage in the
units,
ration-
at
in the
least 1
resolution.
unit per year.
Okay.
All right, any other questions?
Yeah, can you speak to a son or daughter who isn't gonna go to college? And how do we take care of them? Have we just reduced the offerings to them of classes that they would take to fulfill their requirement in English by converting some of these classes to non-English department credits? And if we now made it tougher for someone who wants to be in a trade or in the military to then meet their 4 units of English, what are we doing for the other end of the spectrum?
I do think there's going to be some trade-offs, sure. I don't think necessarily that trade-off would reduce anybody's opportunities outside of RB. I think that it's going to require perhaps some forethought of that student and that student's family and guidance counselors and others to make certain that he or she is getting needs met earlier in the career and in their high school career. So are we making certain that that student has access to AutoCAD or other classes we offer that suit that student? This is about good old-fashioned reading and writing. And we have many of our students who did not meet state standards last year, current seniors who didn't, are taking that film studies class because they didn't think they were going to have to read all that much in there. And so I am concerned that those very students might not get the exposure to reading that they need and writing that they need to work in trades or other places where the reading material is quite high, actually. The complexity of those texts are fairly high. There'll be some trade-offs, yes, and that's come up at leadership.
Any other questions?
Kevin, we didn't have time to come up with this for the curriculum council, or why didn't we see it?
This is the first time we're bringing it forward, so that's why I'm not asking for any action.
Okay.
Because if Laura and you have more questions or want to dig into this more, we'll have time to do a council meeting.
Well, in a
You
way,
can
this
go
doesn't
through this.
belong in a council, it belongs in a committee, John. I mean,
Well, look, we've had this discussion a lot. I mean, my point is, I really like it when, I like Kevin's style, and I dislike it a lot more when at least a couple of us have seen this in depth. And we sort of missed it this time, and I'm just curious why.
We brought this forward when Laura and when both of you were talking with us in regards to the textbook, and that's how you discovered the economics question. Then I said I got to bring forward an English proposal for discussion because I think we're not having the rigorous senior year. So we just started to map this out. This really doesn't need action for a couple months. if we needed to. So we could go into more depth of this if we need to.
But if
So
we.
it didn't follow suit, though. I do understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's hearing about it, which is fine, but I'm just, you're not dismantling that structure,
No.
I take it.
Yeah, but if we were to have deep, intense conversation, John, to me, that's committee work, and that defeats the purpose. The superintendent council, and that's my biased opinion, and I've been 1 out of 7, but when you have systematic meetings with the same people, to me, that's board work. And this is an important move in RB's future. This is where these are the conversations that we should all be having in public with the community to move forward.
Well, there's efficiencies involved, just to have a few people really look something in detail, as opposed to all of us just superficially reviewing it. So I really took, we're sort of getting into this whole thing. If Kevin wants to do it that way, I'm happy with it. I'm just wondering why we didn't do it that way.
Right.
Well, we did, and it was brought to us, and
No, it wasn't. He just said it wasn't.
no, it
This is the
was.
first time I've seen this, so don't tell me it isn't.
It wasn't the first time we saw it. The concept was introduced when we were talking about the textbook.
What, for 10 seconds?
No.
Yeah, come on, you just said that, Laura. Okay, that's beside the point.
Okay, so let's,
No, I'm not done.
okay.
Okay, I think this is a great idea. All right, if we're trying to improve things and the staff realizes we have holes, and we want to make this a better high school, and I think everyone's to be commended for doing this. But I think we need, when we're making this type of change, we should make it provisional, which means we approve it for like a year. A year from now, we get a report on this, well, how did this go? And we should have something to measure to see how it went. So that's, when we vote on this, I'd like 2 proposals. One would be the normal one, the second one would be, provisional for a year. That's all I want to contribute.
All right, anything else?
I probably should ask this when Mr. Beasley was here, and what you can answer is, what kind of effort does it take on the part of the individual teachers now, or the department heads, to, change the curriculum in a class? Because it's the same with economics, where you have to realign it and change the way you've probably taught it the last couple of years. And what effort is that? How do you go about actually, assuming we approve this?
Right.
You got to change the way that you do your syllabus and everything.
Yes.
For your courses. How does that develop, and how difficult is that?
Well, we have something to work with here, so it's not as difficult as a brand new course proposal.
Okay.
However, you are right. You have to realign your calendars. You have to rethink your projects. You have to kind of go through the day-to-day. And anytime, at least in my experience, when there's a brand new course on the table, the first year is sort of an audition year. It would be unsettling to go through the work and then not have it work out. It would be. But I understand we should have a second look at it. I get that. I think of these, the one that perhaps would be the most work is contemporary literature, where we're taking 4 classes and trying to push them into one.
So tell me, you got the superintendent, you have the principal, you have a system, you have a department head, and yet, I'm going to assume for a second you don't teach it. If it's untrue, pretend you don't. But how do the 5 people who are involved, does the teacher try first, and then you approve it, and then Kristen approves it, and then Pam approves it, and then Kevin approves it? Or what's the process?
Well, you would work through your PLC process, your professional learning communities, I would think, right? So,
Yes.
and then, and Kristen oversees that
Right.
work. There are
We report.
reports. They have goals that they're trying to accomplish, and the work is overseen by the assistant principal of the curriculum.
So if a teacher wants to change a curriculum on that, it just has to be approved up through Kristen, or do you have to approve it?
Are you talking
too?
about like changing a project within their course?
No, I'm
or
talking about
a
your
major
ch-
curriculum overhaul?
You're
is-
changing
right.
contemporary lit ABC to a different course.
Right.
Who's got to?
That's our course proposal process, and
Yeah.
Kristen can touch on that a little bit.
So for anything that's a change in the course, like a major change like this or a new course, it goes through the course proposal process, which involves the conversation starting within the department.
Okay.
And whether it's one teacher or a group of teachers that initiates it, the whole department has a conversation to identify exactly what changes they want to make. From there, The department chair brings it to me, we have a conversation, I present it to both Pam and Kevin, and then we bring it back to leadership if they feel like we should move forward with it, and then at leadership, we discuss it in great detail with all the department chairs. And they ask several questions, just like you're asking in regards to the proposal. It gives the department chair time if they need to go back to their department and work through those issues to do that, and then bring it back to leadership one more time. And during that process, we bring it to the Curriculum Advisory Committee for the board before bringing it to you.
So you have a year, well, you have a year kind of to do it for English, but is Mr. Beasley going to be able to go through the whole process for economics?
We did
We
that
kinda did.
already,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that's why we also moved it to the springtime, because in the past, before I got here, it was curriculum proposals were introduced in September.
Okay,
They were vetted for a few weeks, and then they were voted on before October.
okay.
So now we have more time.
Thank you, that's helpful.
All right, anything else, please?
Yeah,
Matt,
Go ahead. No, John, go first.
Matt, there was this big switch a couple years ago, and I know you were part of this, from the AP to honors English. Remember that?
We didn't have an honors track
We
anymore.
have last track and
Okay, so what's your take on all this?
Well, I think right now, I think that, you know, Sarah, the only word of caution I would have is, I see your point in here on how to do that. The only error of caution is that not everybody's gonna go to college.
Right.
And not everybody, and I wanna make sure that the kids that don't go to college, still, and they're gonna need to learn how to write, they're gonna need to learn how to read and all that stuff like that we just give them the potential to make them come out from here. What I'm seeing right here, what you're doing right now is, you're challenging these kids, and with that year-long class, you can be able to make sure that, one, they're experiencing everything they're gonna need to get their writing skills up, which I think is really good. I also think too, is that giving that whole year program right there, it gives you enough time, like, you know, Pam, you said right now, it's, I start up, boom, I got, what am I doing right here? You get to see where your strengths and weaknesses are per student, and being able to gear them to challenge them a little bit to get that strength out, weakness to that strength.
One of the biggest studies in high school research on high school education is that the biggest blow-off is senior year.
I
And
agree.
colleges are concerned because kids push themselves with APs and honor courses to prep for the ACT in their application process, and they take all their electives senior year, and they try to get out of the rigor senior year, do early dismissals, or so this would help kind of work against that.
Plus, I also look at two things right now. In that English curriculum for the senior year, I'm not forcing them to go to AP.
No.
I'm forcing them to do an honors class, or even if they can't do an honors class, I'm taking them to another way to go. I do see your point about the film studies, because if I'm a senior and I've already got my GPA, I already got the college I'm going to, I'm going to try to find a blowout class that last semester so I can just cruise right into anything. I do like your thoughts process on this, and I really think that you guys, for both proposals, that there is, the kids are in focus, you're trying to improve them, and you're looking at a way that you're not going to overwhelm them, but you're going to work with them to make it happen. So I really appreciate all that from that side.
Can I just add one last thing for the board? Is that a month ago, we approved goals, and we said we're going to keep those goals and then monitor growth. And we said that our goal should be 100% of our kids graduate college and career ready. So even those students that are going into the military or into a vocational track or profession, we still wanted them to graduate with the college skills necessary, so that at some point later after graduation, if they wanted to go back to school, they had the foundation. So pushing rigor and pushing these kids to take tougher classes or year-long classes, this is a good thing that this board's discussing tonight, and I appreciate that you're on path with those goals that we set, because that's what we should be doing, is referring
And
to those
Sarah,
goals.
what I would say is those classes that are non-departmental credit, I'm going to throw a challenge back to you and your department, is to make that, what you're accomplishing in that middle section, make those classes try to accomplish that too. And I know in debate, I was in debate, you can do argumentative, you can do persuasive, you can do informational, you can do all that stuff like that. What I'm saying right now to you, and I did win awards, no. What I'm saying right now is, I think that the challenge is back to you on those classes to see what you can do in that, you know what I mean? From a journalism, informational wise, you know, a perfect informational journalism is the obituary writer. because all he is writing is information. So, but it's something to turn it around, but I definitely want to challenge you on that to make that happen.
That'd be a great assignment, wouldn't it?
Well, let's not.
We won't get into
Who's
such
gonna-
detail.
All right. any other-
I'd also like to come, Tim, to address one of your questions, and you asked how this happens in their process for bringing it forward. And ladies, correct me if I'm wrong, but part of the invisible work that we don't see as a board, all of us belong to professional associations. We're reading journals. John, you do the same thing. Ideas are percolating. There's new research. There's research. Educational research is in major paradigm shift at this point. So as our faculty, and we don't always see that, we've been consumed with building issues and other kind of issues. What we see here is that our faculty have been doing exactly what professionals in other areas do. They are reading, they're talking among themselves, and they're saying, we need to move. There is new research out there, there are new paradigms, there are new models, we need to move. And they have those conversations, and then they develop these models, and they bring it forward to us. So that's how that even starts. And we as a board should be very proud and very happy that we have professional staff that are doing that. And they're looking and they're seeing what's new and happening and looking for ways to improve the school. So I just wanted to add that piece.
Okay,
Thank you.
anything else?
Right?
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Kristen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Pam. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate the good presentation and the explanation.
Thanks for your time.